What's going on, guys, and thanks again for being here. Happy New Year. Today I'm reviewing a brand new release from GVM. This is the GVM WS 2D, which is a 2-axis carbon fiber motorized sliders. I'm going to be actually showing you guys here every single feature this thing can do, the entire manual, so you don't go through the frustration to read the manual. So everything you want to know about the sliders, I'm going to be showing you guys here. So don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. And the usual disclaimer, GVM sent me this slider for me to test it out. I don't get paid to say anything here, and all my words and opinions are my own, and this video is not sponsored by GVM or anybody else. This is the GVM WS 2D, which is a 2-axis 31-inch carbon fiber slider, especially for people who are on a budget looking for a motorized slider. I would actually consider this slider. It's not the most perfect and precise thing, but for interviews, point A and point B, and for normal things like time lapses with the 2-axis, I think this slider is going to be actually useful to you. The other sliders that I use here, I have a bunch of sliders from Kessler Crane, the Cine Drive, the Kessler second shooter. It's an excellent slider and it has super precise moves. But the thing is, those sliders are way more expensive than this slider here, and it requires a bunch of cables to connect, and also it's a bit heavy. This one here, the main thing that I love about this slider is because I take it out of the box, 2 batteries here, turn it on, point A, point B, and I'm done. There's no cabling to do here. This whole thing comes out of the box the way it is. Now, if you're actually expecting a $600 slider to actually focus with a 100mm macro lens and a little needle going from point A to point B with a whole parallax thing, this slider is not going to do that for you. But for normal situations, like again, an interview kind of thing here for live video, this slider does absolutely fine. And again, it will not tilt, but it does the panning and the sliding here pretty decently. Another thing that I want to bring up here, this is actually a very smooth slider. It's smooth enough, but I would still recommend you to turn on the stabilizer on the lens just to hide those little micro jitters, because the sliders will definitely show those little micro jitters on the video. It's something very small, but they are there. Especially if you're using lenses like 50mm lenses and 85mm, for example. But most of the interviews that I do with the camera on the side here, I'm going to be using like a 50mm or probably a 35. Especially if you're using a 50mm or 85mm, you're definitely going to need to put the stabilizer on. But for 16mm like this lens here to shoot landscape stuff or time lapse of streets and everything is going to hide those micro jitters. But if your lens has the stabilizer, I would actually highly recommend that you actually turn it on. I'm actually in Pennsylvania, so it's actually too cold to take this thing to a time lapse, plus it is actually going to be raining all week here. So for the time lapse here, as an example, I just shot my keyboards there, placing an iPad on top of one of the keyboards to show you guys the numbers going very quickly, to show you this is actually indeed a time lapse. As you can see here, as a motorized slider is supposed to perform, there's no micro jitters anywhere. Everything is running buttery smooth, no bumps or anything like that. So it's running from point A to point B very smoothly, including the panning. In this example here for live video, I'm using the C100 to perform this test, and as you can see, everything runs pretty good. Sometimes you have to engage the stabilizer on the lens in case you want to avoid any micro jitters that might arise. This slider here, you can do live video, time lapses, even stop motion, and including panorama photography or video. But of course, I'm going to be showing you guys here at least the 2 most used examples, which is live video for interviews and all, and also time lapse. The stop motion, I'm not going to do that because I'm going to be required to actually step in the scene 600 times minimum, and I don't have the time to do this here. As far as load goes, I have the Canon 1DX here with a 16 to 35mm lens, which makes this whole thing decently heavy here. You can use this slider on a horizontal mode, which accepts up to 15 kg payload or 33 pounds, or you can also use on a tilt mode like this here, up to 45 degrees, holding up to 2.5 kg or 5.5 pounds. You can also place this slider on full vertical mode, depending on the camera they're going to use, because the load is going to be actually reduced to 2 kg or 4.4 pounds. As you can see, this camera is actually too heavy for this slider, so I would recommend you to use a smaller camera such as the Sony a7S III or similar. The type of camera that I would assume most people will use here are mirrorless cameras, even the Canon R3, which is a fairly lighter camera compared to the 1DX, for example. And these are the cameras that I would actually recommend you guys to use with the slider, such as the Canon a7S III or similar body, similar type of camera there. Another 2 cameras that I would like to use with this slider is the Canon R3 and also the Canon C100 Mark II. By the way, the Canon R3 I have paid for at B&H, and I'm still waiting for this thing to get here. Who knows when it's gonna get here. And also the C100 Mark II, which is still a great camera, especially if you don't need to shoot anything 4K for a particular client. That's still a great camera. As you can see, the footage looks pretty good. Anything that you might see on the footage there, as long as you turn the stabilizer, I think you should be good to go. Which, by the way, the manual dollies, you know, the dolly that somebody is actually pushing the dolly and the camera guy is actually manually panning the camera, you will always see those little micro jitters in the movies, especially expensive movies. So if they're okay with that, you should be also okay with this tiny little imperfection here. So again, if you're on a budget and if you can afford the $2,000, $3,000 sliders, you're looking for a motorized slider made of carbon fiber that does at least 2 axes here for interview or something simple, this is the slider for you. And even if you're not on a budget, you just want to try to add another slider here, this is also a great acquisition as well. But again, this slider does what it does for what it costs. So again, for time lapse, no problem. For live video, make sure you actually set the stabilizer on the lens and you should have no problems. So as far as time lapse goes, I'm actually pretty happy with the slider if you don't require any tilting, because the slider can only tilt manually with the ball mount that's included with this device here. So this slider can only do left and right and panning only, no tilting. Now if you require some precise moves by focusing on a particular point on the video here, this thing can actually do a pretty good job. It's gonna stay within the little tiny little focusing box there perfectly from point A to point B. So for this particular example here, I'm gonna be actually focusing on that shiny little chrome thing that supports the actual cowbell there. So let's see how this slide performs from point A to point B by aiming precisely on that thing. That's gonna be staying right on that little focus box, which does a pretty good job. One of the things that I love about the slider here is the simplicity that they actually put in here, because to power this thing, all you have to do is to install a Sony battery here for the panning and another one for the A and B slider here, and that's pretty much it. Turn it on, program here A and B, press play, the thing is rolling. Another thing that they claim this slider lasts about 16 hours. I have not tested that, how long the batteries will last here, but what I can tell you is that I was actually fumbling with this thing all day and all night, and I still didn't run out of charge here. The whole weight of this slider here, you're talking about 2 bags of sugar, which is about 1 kilogram each. So this slider weighs only 2 kilograms or 4.8 pounds with everything in it, except the camera. In the box, you're going to find everything that you need to start shooting right away, which is the slider itself. It comes with 2 Sony NPF 750 batteries. You can actually load the 970 here if you want, of course. 2 basic generic battery chargers, a heavy-duty ball mount, and a shutter extension cord, and 6 shutter cords for all types of cameras, and of course, the carrying case. So one thing for you to keep in mind, especially the weight and size of camera that you put as soon as you run A and B here on this slider, I always like to use a couple monopods here, one this side and the other one on this side here, which will absolutely prevent the camera from accidentally tipping over somewhere, because the tripod has 3 legs depending on the orientation that you have the slider here. Well, as soon as you move the camera this way to the either one of the extremes here, the camera and the whole slider might actually tip over. So to avoid this, always use a monopod right here and a monopod right there. As soon as the monopod tip reaches the ground, you just lock it down, do the same thing over here. So every time the camera goes through either one of these extremes here, it don't actually cause the slider to slightly tilt this way because of the weight of the camera. As with any other slider, if you wish to use the slider as a ramp like this here to put the slider slightly inclined like this, all you have to do is to unscrew the tripod plate and rotate it this way, and then when you tilt the tripod, the slider is going to be tilting this way. The way it is right now with the plate facing forward, if you want to tilt the slide this way, you can do that, but you have to remove your monopods right here. And to make that safe, now you have to install a ball mount right here, which is going to allow you to do a slight angle, and then you put the thing back here. And then with the monopod here installed correctly with the ball mount, when it reaches the end here, your slide is once again 100% safe from tipping over. And then when you want to go back to the original position here, the plate actually features a little leveler here that tells you that when you are level. Then lock it down, good to go. As you can see, there are 2 motors on the slider. This motor here on the controller box is in charge of moving the slider left and right. And this other motor, which is right here, is in charge of moving the camera this way and this way, which is the actual panning. So this big button on the back here is the actual lock button, which prevents the motor from getting damaged. So every time you want to screw or unscrew or remove or insert or install anything here, make sure you slide this thing all the way inside here. The best way to do this is to make sure your slide is on off position, and then you can actually freely move a little bit the actual panning here, left and right. And then you can actually slide the button here, which fully locks the panning mechanism here. And then to release, you just release. Now if the slider is on, all you have to do is to move the panning a little bit here, like this. There you go, and then it goes in. Because it has a little bit of a teeth inside there, so sometimes you're gonna get caught in the middle of the thing. So just to pan the camera a little bit here, It didn't go in, a little bit more. Now it goes in, see that? So you gotta do a little bit of this here. This particular ball mount that comes with this unit here, I don't think it is a GVM brand, and even if there was, I'm actually pretty impressed with this thing because actually once you load the camera, once you lock it in, this camera is not gonna move, it's not gonna go anywhere. But I'm gonna be using my Manfrotto simply because of the mounting plates, because everything that I have here is a Manfrotto plate. So I'm gonna be using this for something else, and I'm gonna be actually switching my Manfrotto ball mount head right here. It comes with 2 locking knobs for the actual camera here, so you can actually lock this way and finish locking on the other side. Once that's done, the camera is not going anywhere, and there's no need to over tighten, but of course make sure it is tight. And the actual panning, when you actually loosen this here, the panning, there's a lot of resistance here, which is pretty nice. I'm actually using a lot of force here, and this camera is actually moving pretty slowly, which is pretty cool. So if you want to do some really precise panning like this, you can with this ball mount. Speaking of manual here, this slider is not going anywhere because it is powered on. As soon as you power it off, this thing becomes a manual slider. I'm not sure how precise you can actually go here, but I think with a heavy camera, you can still do a little something here, but I can see that's not gonna work because I can see the footage is not gonna be absolutely butter smooth. But if you need to use this manual, you can certainly do that as long as the slider is powered off. And over here, when I actually power on the slider, the first thing that's going to happen, the thing is going to calibrate itself, and of course the motors are going to be actually locking the thing, so you can't really move it manually, only through the controls. So let's turn this on. I'm going to show you what happens. And also how quiet these motors are. You can't hear anything. That's it. I'm actually moving. Maximum speed, this is the noise that you hear. The microphone is right here. And of course, you can actually set the speed that you like. This is actually with the slider running at 100%, but look what happens when you actually reach the end. And as you move from point A to point B, as you can see, this has a anti-crashing feature, whatever you want to call it. So you don't have to worry about your slider chewing the motor or that horrible crack sound that's going to definitely mess something up, right? So either end here, when you move the slider, I don't even need to look. I can actually be distracted here until this thing reaches the end, and it's going to ramp down and stop. You're not going to see your motors chewing the slider here, or vice versa, whatever that is. Stops right there. Pretty cool. So again, when you actually power the slider, it's going to go do its thing, this calibration right here, and then you can actually move the slider to whatever point that you want. For example, for a particular interview set, all you have to do is this. Look how little time it takes. So the subject is right there. I'm going to actually point the camera this way. Of course, you're going to be looking what you're doing, right? Until you actually precisely frame the person's head or whatever. And then you mark point A here, and then you move the slider this way. And then find the composition that you want there. Turn the camera that way. Once you reach the desired angle there or whatever you're pointing at, hit the point B and hit the play button. That's it. How long did that take? Probably 30 seconds. I also have this slider here, also for GVM. This is actually a lot simpler than this slider, and what I don't like about this one here is because it has a very limited pan, because we have to depend on this. You've probably seen this before, right? So you gotta place the slider right here, make sure it is in the center, and you can only film the subject right in the center of the screen. So right now I'm in the center of the screen. With this particular slider, if I decide to place my subject all the way here to review whatever it is that I'm trying to show here, no problem. You simply place the slide right here, and then you point the camera to where you want. Same exact thing over here, and then you do the opposite here, and you lock it down. Now let's talk about the physical construction of the slider. Everything is made of metal from here to here, including the controller and including the top of this thing here. It has a very nice solid legs, and it's got teeth. And then when you actually tighten it down, it feels very solid. The whole knob here, everything is very solid. And it also comes with a locking feature here, which is the first thing that you should pay attention before you attempt to power on the slider, because you don't want to move this with the thing locked, right? This is actually great when you're actually moving from a room to another, in case you're doing a wedding or corporate video. So if you want to tilt the slider somewhere, you can actually lock it down, everything here, and the camera is not going to be sliding all over the place. Once this thing is locked, the slider is locked, whether it is powered on or powered off. Now when you power on this slider, make sure this thing is actually unlocked, because when you actually power it on, this is what happens. It's going to do a little thing here, and it's going to actually calibrate itself. So this thing is going to move. You don't want this to be accidentally forgotten unlocked, because you might damage something here. I even put a little sticker label here to always remind myself to make sure this thing is unlocked, because when I take this out of the box, I want to make sure the first thing that I'm going to do is to actually unlock this thing. Now, a lot of people, they don't like to read the manuals, right? Which is an unfortunate thing. So when you actually unbox this without reading the manual, you're probably going to be figuring out yourself 10 minutes how to actually unlock this thing here. You simply press it down and then you lock, press it down and you unlock, because if you don't press it down, this is not going anywhere and you don't want to break anything. Just read the manual or watch my video. This is what I'm here for. Now, if you want to get this slider or any other slider and you actually need an extra tripod for this type of application here, to always have a little tripod for a slider like this, I actually have a GVM WS, which is a very affordable tripod. If you want to care to watch the review, the link is right here, which make everything here pretty decent set. Now, this particular tripod here, I'm going to tell you in advance, because if you're looking for precision panning and tilting, this is not going to be the tripod for you. This is actually perfect for holding this slider here, because they do lock very solidly. But for pan and tilt, this doesn't have enough tension or friction to do those butter smooth movements. You're not going to achieve that with this tripod. The GVM WS tripod also has a drop-down system. Instead of you sliding the thing right here, you can actually simply drop on the side and lock it in like this. When I unboxed this, another thing that I was actually very happy to see is a huge improvement from this slider to this slider here, because as you can see, the belt is permanently attached, and so it is here. But as you can see, there's a bump here, so when you actually want to do this manually, you're going to be finding a little resistance here. You can feel like, ta-dum, ta-dum. This slider will not do that. But this particular slider here, even with a slight indentation here, so when you actually use the motors, it doesn't seem to actually affect it at all, because in the footage it doesn't show like the footage doing this. It doesn't. And depending on the speed, it might, but this particular one here, again, you're not going to have this problem. This particular belt requires you to mount point A and point B. This particular one here is an endless loop, and there's nothing to actually cause any denting on the belt. Now I'm going to be going through the entire manual here to show you guys how easy it is to operate this controller box, and also step by step how to use the app as well. The one thing that I don't like about the slider is because I'm not sure why they didn't program the slowly ramp up and the ramp down. This is going to start like, immediately moving once you finish programming. The other slider that I showed you here, even though it's a cheaper slider, they actually do have the smoother ramp up to pick up speed and then ramp it down. This one here currently does not have that feature with this current software here. Hopefully they will add this soon, because if the other slider is able to do this, I don't see why this wouldn't be able to do that, right? I'm using a little C-stand here with the iPhone 13 Pro Max, which shoots very decent video instead of putting a heavy camera here. This is a lot easier for me here. So I'm using a cell phone as a top camera for this particular controller box here. If you're doing time lapse, if you notice here this little camera icon, this is actually where you install your cable. So to avoid any unnecessary cabling, such as extension cable, which this device comes included with, you can actually just plug your camera on this one right here, which requires no additional extension cables, because all the fancy motorized sliders that I have, it is always required a cable here, which can actually be dragging all over the place. And this unit eliminates that process, which is super cool. So put the cable right here, as you can see, and plug it right here. This is how your camera is connected for time-lapse. No extension cables or nothing like that. One thing that I noticed, I guess this little LED little light here is supposed to actually flash once every photo you take on time-lapse, but somehow it is not lighting up. And right now everything is powered with the included Sony NPF 750 batteries, but you can also opt to do a DC input over here and on this motor as well, if you desire to do that. This batteries last forever, but this is actually particularly useful in case you want to do one of those crazy, like a week-long time lapses, maybe a flower kind of, opening up or whatever that is. You can actually do this with the slider here, because you can actually do DC, which you have unlimited power. So when you turn on the slider, the first thing that you're going to see on display here is the quick start. All you have to do is hit play. And then you're going to be able to see the 4 things that this slider can do, which first of all is video, and then time-lapse, which by the way is actually misspelled, and stop motion, and panorama, and then settings. So going back to the beginning here, you have to turn this knob to the left side to select your options here. So let's go to settings first. When you actually press it in, which you can change the language to English or Chinese, in this case you're going to be turning that dial on the right side. Go back to English, and then press and hold to exit here, goes back one step. And then let's go to the video settings. Then you quickly press this button in, and every time you start the slider again from power it on, it's going to be always displaying its default as loop no and the speed 50%. To change the setting, rotate this knob. It's going to say yes or back to no. I like as yes. Press this button quickly once again. Now you can change the speed, which is default to 50%. Very quickly from 1% all the way to 100%. Now this slider is so ridiculously easy to use, it's so simple. So all you have to do first is to actually walk this thing all the way to the corner there. You don't necessarily have to go all the way to the end, but a 31-inch slider, you definitely want to do that. Once this is right here, do your panning, assuming the subject is right there, for example. And then all I have to do is to press the A key, done. If you made a mistake, press the A again, it's going to be cleared out of the memory. And then once you're sure this is what you want to do here, press the A button again and it stores the information. Then you come over here all the way to the other end. And then you actually finish your panning to whatever direction that you want it to go. And then simply press B, which retains the information here. And then you simply hit play, you're done. So it's going to go back to the position that you originally initiated here. And I actually have the looping on. So every time it does this, it's going to be repeatedly going back and forth until you actually physically stop here. And this is at 100%. Notice how silent this motor is. So at any time you can actually press and hold the play button. And then to change the speed, make sure it is selected here, right? And then let's say 75% here. Then press play again. It goes back to the initial mode here, initial place. And now it's at 75%. You want to change the speed again, press and hold. It can be as slow as this. I mean, it can be so slow that you won't even perceive the camera moving, but you know, for example, at 20%. It can be as slow as this here. Press and hold. And that's pretty much it for a live video. It's that simple. And to clear everything off, you just tap the A, tap the B, everything is clear. When you hit play, nothing happens. So to start this whole thing again is a very simple procedure. Go here, position your camera to where you want, press A, and then you do here. And then you want to pan the other way, good. Press the B, and then set the speed that you want. In my case here, I wanted 100% so you guys can see this moving faster. And hit play. It's gonna do its initial calibration thing here. And it's gonna go from here to where I told it to stop, which is right there. There you go. Then starts all over again until you actually physically press and hold here. If you wanna pause it, you can just hit play quickly, and then it's only on pause mode. To hit play, press the play again quickly. Pause, or to completely stop, press and hold. And that's pretty much it for the live video. Now to exit this, you press and hold this knob here, and it's gonna go back to the previous menu, and then let's switch to time lapse, which will rotate this to the left side. Quickly press. So the time lapse, the manual makes this thing so complicated when it is the most simplistic thing. It's like, you know, 2-3 steps and then you're done. I don't know why they write the manual so complicated. And by the way, it's actually missing steps there. So it took me like an hour and a half to figure out precisely what one thing means. So it saves you guys a huge headache. So again, when you get the slider, come back to this video and watch this manual again. On time-lapse mode, it looks very similar to the video mode. You have the A and B and the stop button and play button and everything, with a few changes here. For example, let's start a time-lapse. First, you want to do the move they want. Simply press A, same exact way. Then, of course, when you do your time-lapse, you're going to be actually looking your display of your camera to see exactly where you want the camera to go, right? So when you actually finish your move here, simply press the B button and then you're good to go. You can also temporarily move the camera anywhere you want on the slider, even though it is fully programmed. That's not going to affect anything. You can just park it right here, no problem. Press this button quickly once. Now you have the interval, the time, and the frames per second. So right now let's go to the interval. Buffer. This is actually necessary to have at least a setting of 1 here, which causes you a 1-second delay, just in case the camera is not fully stopped to take the next picture, especially if you're actually doing a slow exposure, like 10 seconds, half a second, or 30 seconds. You can also increase the buffer here for more delay in case your camera doesn't stop on time. For example, let's say you're doing like a 10-second exposure, the thing is gonna move, and then you do an additional 2-second buffer here, which is the delay, and then you make sure the camera is actually complete stopped. In this case, I'm gonna do 1 here because I'm not gonna be doing long exposures. Then select what you want and quickly press the button. Good. And then it jumps to the next one. When you're shooting anything from 8,000 of a second all the way to 1 second, it's the same number here, number 1, and then quickly press down. You're done with that. If you're shooting 1 second or faster, you just set this to number 1. If you're shooting a 2-second exposure, make sure on shutter you set it to number 2. A 10-second exposure, set it to 10. 30 seconds exposure, set it to 30. And even something as absurd as a 900-second exposure, just put the number here, there you go. And this ranges from 999 seconds all the way to 1. And as you can see, you can actually go back here very quickly to 1% again. And I must mention this joystick is not really that precise, so sometimes you have to do a few turns here to actually find the number here. So when you go back, you're gonna see this happen here. So right here I'm setting the buffer as 1 second and the shutter actually 1 second. To get out of here, press and hold, goes back to the previous step. Now rotating this knob to the left side, we're gonna go to the next step, which is the time. The output is how long the actual final time-lapse product will look like. For example, when you set it to 10 seconds, your time-lapse finished movie is gonna last 10 seconds. Or your time-lapse can actually last as long as 999 seconds, and then you translate that to minutes, you know how long that will be. And assume you have enough car to shoot as many pictures here. So I'm gonna leave mine as 10 seconds. When you press this button in once again, the delay simply means how long the time-lapse will start. If you want the delay to be like in a few seconds here, like 12 seconds before this thing starts running, what's gonna happen is when you're actually ready to set, it's gonna go here, it's gonna take 12 seconds before anything starts, and then the time-lapse actually finally starts. If you don't want any delay, just set it to 0. So as soon as you press play, the slider is gonna come to the original position and start the time-lapse immediately, no delay whatsoever. When you finish here, press and hold this button, then it goes back to the previous menu again. Then the last thing that you need is to set your frame rate. Go right here. It's currently default always at 24 when you actually power off the slider. So you gotta change this every time you power off the unit. Then here you can choose from 15 frames per second, 24, 25, 30, 50 or 60. I usually like 30. Once you're done, press and hold, it will take you back to the previous page. And the time again set to 10 seconds here is how long your time lapse is after you actually render the time lapse as a video. And lastly, it is set to 30 frames per second. Press and hold again to go back to the previous page. Now as you notice here, you have the 2 asterisks in place of A and B, which means I did not program my time-lapse movie yet. Also make sure your shutter cable is connected here, otherwise you're not going to be taking any pictures with this camera, right? So once everything is set here, my point A and B set correctly, all you gotta do is hit the play button. It's gonna go to the original point A here. Right now I have it as a 10-second time-lapse once it turns into a video. Then you can see it moving a little bit here. At any time you can actually quickly press the play button. It's going to be pausing the time lapse. You didn't screw anything up. Once you're ready to resume, quickly press the play button again. Time lapse resumes. And I can see it moving. Like it moves, stops, takes the picture, moves, stops, takes the picture as it should be. Now to completely stop the time lapse, press and hold the play button. And that's it. Now when I actually press play again, it's gonna go back to the initial setting here, so everything is cancelled, so the whole thing starts from scratch again, just in case you mess up the exposure or whatever that is. Now just to show you guys here how the slider is actually behaving every time it shoots, moves and shoots, I'm gonna be actually doing something useless here, such as a 2-second time-lapse video, so you can actually see how the camera is actually behaving. It's gonna move to a bigger move like this to fulfill only the 2-second time-lapse, if you know what I'm saying. So the camera is actually gonna travel more. Okay, 2 seconds, press and hold, goes back to the main thing. There you go. Now you can see how the camera moves. So it moves, stops, shoots. Moves, stops, shoots. Again and again. So this looks right. So again, as you can see, this is a simplistic thing here, and the manual is written so complicated. This is actually so easy, and they made it so complicated on the little pamphlet that comes included. So just ignore the whole thing. just watch my video here. So right now I'm going to be doing a 5-second exposure, which of course you're going to have to change the program here. Make sure the play button is on full stop mode, otherwise nothing's going to let you do anything. So you press this button here quickly, and then you press the interval once, and then leave the buffer alone for 1 second delay, and then shutter 5 seconds right here. Let's see what happens. Press and hold, everything else is set to the same thing. Press and hold, it goes back to the main page. Press play. So it's gonna move. Then it shoots. In case you need more delay, no problem. Come back here, stop the time lapse, press and hold the play button. So that was the last shot before I press the play. So the camera's not doing anything right now. So you press here quickly, go to the settings, interval, then you press the button, and then the buffer switches to 2 seconds. And then press and hold. Now as you see, the interval is now a 7-second kind of thing, because first of all is the 5-second exposure here plus the 2-second buffer. So all that counts into each frame that you want to be taking as a picture of. Then make sure you press and hold until you actually see this page right here, and then you actually press play. Now we're doing a 5-second exposure with the 2-second buffer, just to make sure this camera is in complete stop, because for a 30-second exposure, you have to make sure this thing comes to a complete stop if you don't want anything blurry on your images, right? So right now, it's actually shooting. That's the last one. It's a long exposure, sorry. After it finishes, the curtain closed, it moved, stops, then there you go, perfect. If the camera decides to move and it shoots very quickly, again, just increase the buffer to an additional second or so. Now I'm going to be showing you guys here one last time without any interruption whatsoever, so you make sure you got this. So main menu, press the button here, interval, buffer, shutter, everything good to go, press and hold. Next will be the time, make sure the information is correct. I want my video to last 10 seconds, so put it here. Don't worry about the delay. And then frames per second 30. If you want to change, you go here, change it to whatever you want. I want 30, press and hold, press and hold, press play. You're good to go. That's it. Now when you press and hold again, it's gonna go to the next thing, which is the stop motion. It's the same thing as a time lapse. The only difference is you have to press a button here every time you're shooting. For example, let's say they have a table with a bunch of little Legos here or whatever. So you do the first move, the camera stops. Then when you're ready for the next shoot, get out of the scene, press the button, this camera is gonna be shoot and advance 1 step, and then you keep doing that until your stop motion time lapse is completed. One tip here for time lapse, make sure you're actually shooting at a low shutter speed, even if you are outdoors on a bright daylight, especially if you're shooting people walking, moving around. Try to shoot there at a very slow shutter speed, 1/15 of a second, even as low as 1 second exposure. When you actually put the time lapse together, everything is going to be buttery smooth. The actual people walking, cars passing, it's going to be a very nice look. Now if you shoot everything fast, 1/500 of a second, everything's going to be choppy. So it depends on the artist who is behind this whole thing creating a time lapse. If you don't know how to do a professional time lapse as far as looks go, there's a lot of tutorials on YouTube how to do a professional looking time lapse. If you decide to shoot people walking, moving or running, cars passing by on the street, you know, watch those videos, and then you're going to be doing a much better result with the time lapse with the slider here. Now let's go to stop motion, press the button quickly. And again, the time here, it means how long your time lapse or stop motion time lapse is gonna last when you convert this to a video, whether it is a 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second, whatever. It has nothing to do with the camera shutter speed here. The time again is how long your final product video as time lapse is gonna look like. If you want a 1 minute time lapse, set this time here to 60 seconds, and then it's gonna choose how many frames that it takes to fulfill the whole 60-second time lapse kind of thing. And the longer time you choose, of course, the more pictures are required for you to actually load your card with. There's one thing on the software here that it is super annoying. All the program that I did here, I have to start over again because there's a bug on the firmware that right now, even though I'm on full stop mode, the camera is not gonna move, nothing's gonna let it move here. If I press and hold, it switches to the video, for example. Time lapse, it doesn't work. Now, even if I want to switch to video, and then I'm on full stop mode here, the camera is not moving, it's not doing anything. Even if I clear the tracks here, A and B, it doesn't move. So it forces me to actually shut this off, and then it started over again, and then I have to restart the whole damn thing again. So I was doing stop motion, I gotta do the whole thing again. Gotta wait until the whole thing comes here, right? Okay. This gotta be fixed because right now it's super annoying. I'm gonna move the camera right here just for now. So again, let's go to the stop motion. Press this once. The time, I want it to be 10 seconds. I don't want any delay. I'm gonna press and hold to skip that page. Now frames per second, I want it to be 30 frames per second. Press and hold, press and hold. Now you set your points here, see the asterisk, set the A if you want the camera this way, and then B, and pan the camera that way. Okay, B. And then press play. Now what's gonna happen is it's gonna take an initial shot. Apparently on stop motion time lapse, you're not allowed to move the camera anywhere on the slider. So you're pretty much stuck until you get out of here. So right now you set your A and B point. Everything is on stop mode. As you can see here, the square means stopped. All you have to do is to press quickly the play button. Nothing's going to happen until you hit the A or B button. When you press the B button, the camera is gonna take a picture and advance one step here. And then you press the B button again. Takes another picture and advances. You can either press the A button to go back. I don't know why you would want to do that, but you can actually do that. Now it's going backwards that way. So you want to be pressing the B, right? So I'm going to show you guys here what's happening. I'm going to just change the output settings to a shorter thing so you can actually see a larger movement of the camera. So press play, nothing happens. Press the B key here. Then it's going to advance. Then take a picture. You can see move, right? Yes. There you go. That's all you gotta do. And A is gonna go back that way. So that's all it takes for the stop motion. And then to get off here, don't forget to actually press and hold the play button because you need to cancel the actual program here. Otherwise you're stuck everywhere, right? Press and hold. And now when it is on stop mode, then you can actually press and hold this button and then you actually change your program here. The next one is going to be the panorama. So it's pretty self-explanatory here. So you just press this button, press it once again. Then you have again your interval with a slight change. Now is photo, how many photos you want for your panorama, and then the delay, which again I explained is how long you want the slider to wait until the actual thing starts. If you want the slider to start operating immediately, just choose delay as 0 seconds. And the same thing here, the buffer, always leave at 1 second. And the same thing with the shutter here. If your shutter is like 1 second or faster, set it to 1. If your shutter here is 10 seconds, set it to number 10 here, which is 10S. Press and hold to go to the previous page. Photo. How many photos you want? From 0 to 999. Press and hold to exit, and press and hold to exit again. Press the play button. It's going to do the same exact thing. Only this time the camera is not going to be moving. It's going to be just panning, just panning the camera. To stop anytime, press and hold. Everything stopped. And that's pretty much it. The entire menu here. Now I'm going to be showing you guys here using the app, which is super easy. So right now is the GVM Slider app. Launch the app. The thing is going to ask you for your email address, your password and everything. This is one thing that I don't like about it. So anyway, once you set up the account, you can actually use the app. So connect. This thing connects instantly. First thing it's going to ask is to use your Bluetooth. Once you do that, every time it's going to remember. So first of all, with the app here, you no longer need to shut off the slider to actually operate it manually. Right now, everything is locked because the motors are on, right? You simply slide this button here and then confirm the switch. Now it becomes a free to move slider. And then you want to do this button here. It goes back to locking mode, and which you can actually slide this way, back and forth, left and right. You can actually pan right here. The loop, you can actually choose loop or no loop. Everything is right in your face here, which is good. Now in the middle here, all the way to the left, you're going to see the settings, which is the joystick settings, the slide speed, the pan speed. I actually like to have everything at 100%, and I'm going to change the speed later. And on the bottom right side here, as I explained on the controller here, is the same delay, how long you want the slide to delay before it starts actually doing your time lapse or your video or whatever. So you can choose from off to 12 seconds. I want to set it to off because I don't need any delay. I want this thing to start right away. On the bottom left is the move time, how long you want the time lapse to last as a finished product as a movie. For right now, I have a 10 second. You can have a time lapse that lasts a minute and 10 seconds, or 1 hour, 1 minute and 10 seconds, or 1 hour, 10 minutes and 10 seconds. I'm gonna choose 10 again. On the very top right, you see your battery status here. I think the X, I guess is this one here, says 83%, and the Y, I'm assuming is this one here, says 85%. And over here you have your help and your record button here. I guess for time-lapse it should work, but for a live video to press record, this does nothing. So on the top center, you're gonna see that we are on video shoot mode. So in order for you to install your programming, just slide this as you would with the controller box here. And then you select your pen the way you want. And then you click Add Point. And then you finish again with the other B move here, B position. And then you pan the camera to whatever you want. And then you add point. And then you select here. Select point A and then select point B. And then start running. That's all there is to it. Just gonna go back to the initial point A right there. And then it's doing this thing. You can pause. You can resume, pause, resume, or you completely exit here without pressing, holding anything. On video shoot, on the bottom left, the move time means how fast you want the slider to move. Nothing to do with time lapse here. So right now at 1 second, start running. See the initial jerk thing? This doesn't have that smooth ramp up and ramp down. It's gonna go this way here. Let's change to a slower speed. You can go the whole hour here if you want, right? But let's do, for example, 50. Should move pretty slow right now. There you go. So imagine how slow that's gonna be if we actually did the, I don't know, 4 hours or 23 hours, right? So once you're happy with this move here, something that you're gonna use a lot, whatever the point A and point B that you just created here with the panning and all. So you actually want to hit save and then video. And then done, click OK. You see that field that just appeared there? Actually it's because my VPN is on, so even to save something, they like to know your IP address, which is something that I don't like, and I don't think that's right. So you cannot save anything. You cannot create an account, a VPN on. So the reason why I'm not going to be turning it off is because, again, they need to fix this software-wise, because even if you save it and you load it, just so you know, right now with the current software, you cannot save. They will change this in the future after this video was done, but right now, the making of this video, this is what the problem is. Now to clear the point A and point B on the slider, you can actually simply press the A and B here, the same exact thing with the app. Press the A, find the point A here with this little garbage can, press it on, remove, yes. You clear this whole thing out, and then you actually start over again to whatever position that you want here. Now let's go to the time lapse, which looks identical to the same point A, point B, the same exact thing here. The only thing that changes is the bottom part of the screen, which we have now the stop time, this, and then you have the output time, and then the frames per second, and the delay off and on. So the delay, you guys know already what that is. And the frames per second also, let's set it to 30 frames per second. And the output time is how long your finished movie time lapse will look like after you render the whole thing here. So if you do 10 seconds, it's going to require about 600 images here. Now when I go to the stop time here, there are 3 things to worry about. This exposure time, and every time I change this number here, something goes wrong. So completely ignore this, okay? Leave it as 1. I don't think you can actually set it to 0. Yeah, leave it as 1. The only thing that you want to worry about here is the exposure on the middle here, the 022999, and actually the buffer time. Set the buffer time always to at least 1 second, and the exposure time is the same thing as I explained before here. If you're shooting a 10-second exposure, make sure you do at number 10 here, which means when the camera shoots a 10-second long exposure, this is going to be waiting the whole 10 seconds plus the extra second here, which is the buffer, which every time the camera advances, the buffer is going to ensure the extra 1 second is going to delay the camera before it starts to fire the camera again, okay? You can also choose the buffer to 0, but I always like at least 1 second. If you're shooting a very long exposure, I would highly recommend that you do at least a 2 second on the buffer here. So right now I'm shooting at 1/30th of a second, so exposure time, always leave this alone, set it to 1. Exposure time 022999, this is actually when you want to change. So 30th of a second, 1 second, it doesn't matter. Should be okay. And the buffer, I want to go back to 1 because I don't need more than 1 second delay here. So hit OK. And then I want to do my points here, my movements. So you want to clear everything. So I'm going to be doing my moves from scratch again. Pan this way. Add point. Then you want to slide this over here. And do your thing. Add point. Then on select, hit your points here. Make sure you connect your cable, of course. Then it starts running and it should be working. There you go. So shoots, move, shoots. Same thing. So you can actually pause, resume, shoot, move, shoot, and then exit completely. Same thing here with the stop motion. Start running, and then you do whatever you gotta do. When you're ready, next photo, it's gonna take a picture. Then you go there, move a little Lego or whatever it is that you gotta do. Next photo, and next photo. You can also go to the previous photo. So press exit. Then lastly is the panorama. So I wanna actually dump this here because it's a slightly different thing. I'm going to be only utilizing the pan. So if I want to start the pan this way here, then add point. And then I want to choose the other panning, which is right here. And then add point. There you go. And hit select, point A and point B. Then how many photos you want? I want like, I don't know, 31 pictures. So once you're set with your settings here, the stop time and the photos and the delay, whatever it is, click on start running, go back to that. It's going to take a picture and then advance this, then advance next. The more pictures, the less the pen is going to move. If you want to do 10 pictures, of course it's going to move like, you know, vroom, vroom, vroom. 200 pictures is going to be like ta, 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 ta. You know, so right now for 31 pictures, it's going to be moving this way here. And it's that simple. Click pause. If you want to completely exit out of here, click exit and you're done. So that's pretty much it for the app. And that's the end of my review. I hope you liked the content that I provided here. If you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing, and also feel free to browse the other videos that I make here because all my reviews are in this much detail. And if you have any questions or you want to drop down in the comments on the comment section there, I'll respond to everything that I see. So thank you again very much for being here. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.